Welcome to Italics, television for the Italian-American experience. I'm your host, Anthony Tamburri. Nadina LaSpina, activist, teacher, and author, talks to Dr. Joseph Sciorra about her memoir, Such a Pretty Girl, a story of struggle, empowerment, and disability pride. Nadina shares the excruciating experience of growing up with polio in Sicily, of her later activism in the disability rights movement in the US and in Italy, and her final reconciliation with Riposto, her hometown. Let's join them now.
Welcome, Nadina.
I'm thrilled to be here. For people who are blind or visually impaired, I'm going to describe what we have here. I am a white woman, though I am Sicilian, so my complexion is it's a bit olive, I guess. Is that what you call it? And I have very wavy, curly Sicilian hair. Very gray at this point. And in the background, you see what's really my bed covered by a maroon bedspread. And the prints that are on the wall are all of works by disabled artists.
I am a white man. I'm also olive complected with a solidly Italian nose. Graying in the temples. I have a gray, not quite a goatee, just a little pizzico, little thing on the on my chin.
Nice.
And I have a slightly pink background, and on the wall I have two paintings, and one of the paintings is of an Italian ex voto. It depicts a young woman on her knees imploring Saint Anthony, who's hovering in a sort of cloud above the floor, and they are in a barn-like structure because she is imploring what we can assume to be her calf, and who must be ill, and she's asking for a miraculous healing for this calf.
I love it.
Yeah.
I really love it.
So we've invited you to talk about your memoir, Such a Pretty Girl, a story of struggle, empowerment, and disability pride. The title, both the first half of the title and the second half of the title, because I think it helps someone who hasn't read the book to understand a lot of what you write about. And so let's begin with the first half of the title, Such a Pretty Girl. Could you tell us about that phrase?
Yes, such a pretty girl is what I kept hearing when I was growing up in the little town of Riposto in Sicily, which is in the province of Catania. But they didn't say, oh, such a pretty girl. They said, such a pretty girl. What a shame. What a shame. Che peccato. Che bella bambina. Che peccato. And I didn't understand. I thought that they were sad because I was pretty. Of course, what they were saying was that beauty for a woman is a commodity, and my beauty was spoiled by my disability, and there was the shame, really. So love, marriage, family, that was not something that was in the future for me. And it made me feel so different from all the other little girls. And it made me feel that that something was really terribly wrong with me. It made me wish I was ugly. In fact, the first sentence of the book it starts with when I was 4 or 5, I wanted to be ugly. And my mother was a real Sicilian woman, you know, she was a beautiful woman, and she loved to laugh, and we did a lot of laughing together. But as soon as she was there with me in our arms, and they were saying, oh, che peccato, che peccato, I mean, with tears in their eyes, my mother would start crying too. So that's the first part of the title, Such a Pretty Girl. But then underneath, it says a story of struggle, empowerment, and disability pride. You could say that Such a Pretty Girl, you know, that's the beginning, and that's what happens after. You know, there's a period of struggle, and then I find the disability rights movement and become an activist.
For those who haven't read the book and are curious about it, you had contracted polio as a young child in Sicily.
I was 16 months old, just starting to walk.
I mean, you really conveyed that burden that people put upon you and your family because of your disability. You did a really wonderful job of, you know, explaining your mother Maria and your father Giovanni, in particular, sort of his anger at the sort of injustice and ignorance on a number of different fronts, in terms of politicians and organized crime, but also the ways in which you were being treated. So it was he, to a large degree, that wanted to come to the United States so that you would get better treatment than you were receiving in Sicily.
Yes. I remember my father being angry whenever he heard people saying, che peccato, and he would say, ignoranti, don't listen to them, ignoranti. Sicily, of course, was the poorest region and didn't get treated equally, certainly, by the government. And so my father was always ready to fight injustice. I learned, I think, from my father, that word, injustice, injustice, and how you had to fight injustice. And my father was not a very religious man, by the way, not at all. It was my mother that would bring me to the nuns and bring me to the church, and she would kneel with me in her arms in front of the Addolorata and light a candle. And I could see, you know, the Addolorata's face and my mother's face, you know, this beautiful face, but so sad, full of agony and sorrow. And at times, you know, I felt like they were one and the same. They even had the same name, Maria.
Right.
My father's idea was always, ever since I can remember, to bring me to the United States. And he always told me, in America, guarisci. Guarisci in Italian means you'll be cured. My father was was a smart man. I'm sure he knew I couldn't really be cured of polio, but he knew that I could get better treatment here. Sometimes, I mean, my father loved me so much, and I adored my father. I really adored my father. I loved my father, both of them, but very wonderful people. But still, I felt that was always a disappointment, you know, because he wanted me to be cured. He wanted me to walk. That
is very much part of the second half of your book title, which is Struggle, Empowerment, and Disability Pride. It was a process, right? This is part of what the memoir helps the reader understand.
I wrote it more in the style of a novel, really. And it is in chronological order. And everybody always told me, no, a memoir should not be in chronological order. And somehow it felt right to me to do it this way, so that the reader could identify with me and watch my development, the development of my character, and watch me grow and change from a victim, you know, to a fighter. Someone who's going to fight, not just for myself, but for other people who are like me, to make this a better world for us.
So as part of that history, the family arrives in the early 60s. You're around 12 or 13 years old. And then you also go through a series of treatments.
Torture, again.
again, in quotation marks, here in New York City and in the United States. You talk about a young woman that you meet, Audrey. Your relationship with her was a kind of mirror, I think, you know, that you saw yourself, but you saw yourself also in a different way. It wasn't the exact reflection. And there was a symbiotic relationship that at a certain point diverges and is in part of your empowerment, right? It's part of the struggle, is part of the empowerment, and part of your gaining of knowledge and your activist work later on.
Yes, the Audrey, that's the name I use in the book, and I became very, very close. We were best friends. Yes, I did learn English from her, from listening to her records, and we remained best friends after. And we both heard the same messages. I mean, which were the same messages I was hearing in Sicily, maybe not with such religious connotation. You know, I wanted to study. She thought it was a waste of time. What are you going to do? Nobody's going to hire you. Who's going to give you a job? And she was much more affected than I was. She really fell for that horrible mentality, attitude, that she really believed that she could never have a good life. And she would tell me, I don't want to be handicapped. That was the word then. I don't want to be handicapped. I want to be a woman, a real woman. I kind of agreed with her. At the same time, when she started talking about suicide, that was something that I could not see for myself. She did commit suicide, and she actually made several attempts before she succeeded, which means that she wasn't given the help that she needed. And after she committed suicide, I fell into a very deep depression.
Right. You know, for me, not knowing about the book, not knowing you, I was, you know, didn't know that you had gone on to study Italian. You taught Italian.
Italian, yes.
In New York University, in Hofstra, and in the New School. But it was a struggle as the second half of
It was always a struggle. Yeah, it was always a struggle. There was a lot of discrimination then. And I struggled to walk, for one thing, with crutches, with braces and crutches first, and then with prosthesis later on. I felt that, you know, I had to look and act as normal as I could to fit in. That's how we were made to feel. And sometimes I would try and get my classes all in one classroom, but I would stand for hours because it was too hard to sit down and then get up again. But I loved being in the classroom, and I loved teaching the language. Of course, then I went on at the new school to teach disability studies. But this is after, you know, I had been in the movement for years.
What were your early forays with the movement? Who did you meet? What were those like? You know, you became very active.
I believe that there's never one person that starts a movement, but there's usually one person here and there, maybe more than one. That's kind of the spark. There was a young woman in Brooklyn, her name is Judy, and she published a book recently, a memoir she wrote together with another woman. She wanted to be a teacher, and she was denied by the Board of Education a license to teach because she used a wheelchair. She had polio, and she used a wheelchair. She sued the Board of Education, and it was in the papers. And I remember reading about it and being in awe of this young woman. I wanted to meet her. I finally did meet her, but this was after a while because in the meantime, I lost my best friend. My first coming home experience, I guess, was in the hospital when I met all these other disabled kids, you know, because in Sicily, I thought I was the only one. But then when I meet people in the movement and we have these kind of consciousness raising, you know, groups, and we compare notes and we see that it's not just me, you know, but there's a pattern there. We're all being treated this way. And we realize that it's not so much the disability that's making us unhappy. And there's nothing that we can do about the disability. But the way we are treated because of the disability. It was a time of movements, so we can have our own movements. And in fact, the very first sign that I make says, if you think we're helpless, I've got news for you, man. You know, we used to say, man. Right. We can fight for our rights just as well as you can. And it gave me such a feeling of strength and empowerment that here we are fighting back. Most of us who started the movement that were mobility impaired, but they were blind people too, and others with different types of disabilities. You know, this is the shift that I see. It's not my fault. It's not my problem. It's society's fault. And it's society's problem. And we can change it, and we can fight and change it. And that's how I got involved in the movement.
Right. Reading your book, seeing the arrests here in New York, the arrests down in DC, the crawling up the steps of, was it the Capitol?
Up the steps, yes.
And such a powerful act of protest that has helped to change the world in the United States, at least. After years and years, the buses have been augmented.
It's taken so long. Unfortunately, the way the ADA is written, we say it's a law without teeth in the sense that it doesn't have a mechanism that's written into the law to make business and government comply with the law. So the only way we have is to file lawsuits, and we do. And the first time I got arrested, I found it such an empowering act. Then here I am. I am willing to do whatever it takes. It's a sacrifice. It's not pleasant. They take you in, they take everything from you, and they put everything in a big bag. This is when they put you through the process. You have to be fingerprinted, you have to be photographed, and it may take hours and hours and hours, because sometimes there are many of us who get arrested. Now, when I was getting arrested with the organization ADAPT, and ADAPT is a very grassroots type of organization. There is no hierarchy in the sense there's no president or even board. We just come together. And I have been arrested not only for disability rights, in the disability movement, but for other causes too. None of us are just disabled and that's it. I'm disabled, I'm a woman, I'm Sicilian, I have so many identities there. And of course there are those who are disabled and are also people of color. There's, we used to call it double discrimination. Now we talk more about how things kind of intersect. My identity as a feminist, for example, and I am a second wave feminist, at times has conflicted with my pride in being a a disabled woman.
How so?
For example, I am a pro-choice, of course, being a feminist, and I will defend a woman's right to end a pregnancy for whatever reason, even if it's just that she doesn't want to, whatever, lose her figure. But yet there are times when I hear that the fetus was discovered to have a disability, such as spina bifida sometimes, or which is the disability that Audrey had, Down syndrome. They can always tell. And usually those are women who really want to have a child, but they feel that they have to have an abortion because they don't want to have a disabled child. My wish is for the disabled children to all feel welcome in this world. And though I understand how this woman feels, and I know how little support there is in our society, and I will support the woman's right because I am a feminist. At the same time, it hurts.
You, in addition to being an activist here in the United States, you went back to Italy and worked with disabled activists in Italy as well. Tell us about it.
It was a wonderful time. I met such wonderful, wonderful people. And in Italy, it was a little different. The government has the duty, the responsibility.
Because it's in the Constitution, I remember you saying.
Right. So, yes, we fought for for access and also for better medical care.
You had talked about you never wanted to go back to Riposto, your hometown.
Yeah.
But in the end of the book, you do.
Riposto, I make it in a way a symbol of this bad place where you feel so different from everybody else and everybody feels pity for you, piedismo in Italian. And also if you become disabled later in life, and all of a sudden you find yourself disabled. My husband was also an activist and we met in the disability movement and he had multiple sclerosis and he passed away a year ago.
Danny.
Yes. He felt like, okay, my life is over. I'm no good anymore. Until he found the movement and then he started fighting. He was a great activist and a wonderful man. For the one time when my father brings me back to Riposto, I have this terrible experience where I feel suffocated. I was in the middle of a depression. I mean, my friend had just committed suicide, and he thought it would cheer me up to go to Italy. And but when I found myself in Riposto, all those memories just came and I was buried under this childhood that had been so difficult for me. Even though my relatives, when they read it, they get upset. How could that be? We all loved you so much. That's a problem when you write a memoir, So at the end of that chapter is when I say, I never want to go back to Riposto. Right. And I don't go back to Riposto because when all those years with that, I'm meeting all these disabled people, and I'm traveling mostly in the north. But then when I started writing the book, and I was writing, and I didn't even know where I was going, but I just felt the desire to go back, and I go back to the little town where I was born. And even though much has changed, there's a great seaport there where there used to be a beautiful beach. I miss the beach. My mother used to take me to the beach when I was little all the time, every day. But much of the town was so identical, exactly the same, still, after 50 years. It was amazing to me to see these streets, these tiny little streets, and in my wheelchair, the cobblestones. It was so such an amazing experience, and I found the house in Via Libertà. The name of the street is Libertà, where I was born. And but what happens is that all the good memories come back. The good memories that had been buried for so many years under those bad ones, they all come back to me. And not only, but I discovered the beauty of this place, unbelievable beauty. This beauty had been taken away from me by those bad memories of my childhood. At the same time, it was so wonderful to find myself there. And this is it. This is where I was born. These are my roots.
I'm very happy that you wrote your book. It is incredibly engaging, informative, and extremely powerful. Thank you, Nadina.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for watching this episode of Italics. I'm Anthony Tamburri. Arrivederci alla prossima puntata.